Hello, and thank you for joining us today. On behalf of HUD's Office of Housing Counseling, I'd like to welcome you to our training, Spot the Signs, Avoid the Latest Frauds and Scams. Before we get started, we're going to go over some logistics that might be helpful for you over the course of the next hour. First of all, if you have questions, you can submit those either via the chat box or the Q&A box. All participants are joined in listen-only mode, so you'll need to communicate with us in writing. If you have any technical issues, please put those in the chat and send the message to the host. My colleague William will be there to help sort you out. And then if you have any content-related questions, do submit those in the Q&A box, and we will either try to get you an answer in writing or address your question at the end of the webinar verbally. As some of you may have seen, the materials for today are posted on the HUD Exchange, and the link is in the chat. So there you'll find the slides and the two handouts that we're going to reference. And then a recording and transcript will be posted about 7 to 14 days after the live webinar. If you would like to get credit for attending this training today, we will mark attendance for everyone following the live webinar. And then you can go to your HUD Exchange account, find your learning transcript, and that's where you'll be able to print a webinar certificate. So you'll just select this course name and click the print certificate button. Okay, so as many of you have seen before, we're going to be using Mentimeter throughout this presentation to poll you and also do some quiz questions. So anytime you see the icon at the bottom right of the screen, you'll know it's time for Mentimeter. And we're actually going to start right now. So if you go to menti.com, you can use this code, or you can use the code that I'm going to drop in the chat right now. So again, you'll either go to that link in the chat or you'll go to menti.com and use the code 5661-8033. And when you're in there, hit that thumbs up so that we can see how many folks are getting in. And it looks like a number of you are joining, which is great to see. So let's move to our first poll question. We would love to know, have you assisted a client who was a victim of a scam? So it's just yes or no. Maybe you've seen this before. Maybe you're new to housing counseling and you don't have much experience with this yet, but just trying to get a sense from the audience of how much experience you have and what you might have encountered. So yeah, it looks like we've got a lot of yeses. And a good proportion of you are saying no or unsure. So regardless, I think you're all in the right place. So there are scams that we have seen either ourselves in our own lives or that we've assisted clients with. And there are also always new ways that scammers are trying to trick folks. So we're going to hear a lot about that today as well. So thanks for participating in the Mentimeter. And I think we'll go back to the slides. Our presenters today will be myself, Claire Weatherby. I work for ICF as a technical assistance provider. And I'm also based in New York. I used to be a HUD certified housing counselor, and I've worked on a variety of homeownership preservation programs, including Hurricane Sandy recovery and also some home rehab loan programs. So I'm very happy to be with you today. We also have Carol Cando-Pineda, who is counsel at the Division of Consumer and Business Education at the Federal Trade Commission. And we have Josh Friedman, who is a senior compliance analyst / attorney with the Bureau of Service Member Affairs at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So we've got some great experts on the line for you today. As far as our presentation today, we're going to start with a welcome from the Office of Housing Counseling. And then we'll get a brief grounding in some common types of frauds and scams and the ways in which they might try to approach a consumer. From Carol, we will understand the latest technologies. So how are scammers using things like texting, crypto to trip up folks, confuse them, and engage them in a scam? And then both Josh and I are going to go through real life scenarios and try and help you spot those red flags. So we've got one scenario that is related to a homeowner, and then we've got a second one that is related to a military service member. Then we'll close it out with some tools and resources and the question and answer. So I'd like to hand it over to Gerald Mayer from the Office of Housing Counseling.
Thank you, Claire, and welcome to all the HUD certified housing counselors and other folks joining us to learn about spotting the signs and avoiding the latest frauds and scams. Today, we'll hear from the experts at the Federal Trade Commission and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Both are federal agencies that are on the front lines protecting consumers every day, and they have all our thanks for their vital work and for joining us for this training, of course. Counselors also play a vital role in assisting HUD clients achieve their financial and their housing goals. They're uniquely positioned to help clients spot, avoid, and recover from frauds and scams. Today's presentation will help us learn about the latest high-tech scams, from simple base text scams to wire fraud and cryptocurrency scams. We will also learn how these pernicious scammers target homeowners and our military families. Also, on a lighter note, June is National Homeownership Month, and HUD is sponsoring over 50 events all around the country to honor homeownership and recognize the contribution of housing professionals and HUD partners. We have a week or so to go till the end of Homeownership Month, and to round out the schedule, we're hosting the next Housing Counseling Federal Advisory Committee meeting at the Japanese American National Museum in Los Angeles, California, on Thursday, June 29th. This live and in-person meeting is open to the public. The meeting will reinforce HUD's ongoing efforts to reach deeper into the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities through housing counseling services that are responsive to their cultural practices, preferred languages, and communication needs. This is the first committee meeting we are holding outside of HUD headquarters in Washington, D.C. For the last 5 years. And you'll be able to also join virtually if you're not able to attend in person. If you visit our HUD Exchange page or visit the press room on HUD.gov to read the press release with all of the registration information, you can check the comments section in today's webinar for the registration link, or look in your email box for your invitation to participate. Also, we are holding registration open right up until the meeting date, so you can continue to register. We are not closing it today, we're keeping it open for you. So without further ado, I'll turn the mic over to Claire, who will take us through the rest of today's program.
Thank you, Gerald. Very exciting about that Housing Counseling Federal Advisory Committee meeting at a new location in California. So let's get started with our frauds and scams content. In general, most scams will have similar goals. So you can bucket them into those that are trying to obtain personally identifying information or personal financial information. And then there are frauds and scams that are literally trying to get the consumer to send money. So these are our two big buckets, and you'll kind of see throughout the presentation the ways that these may show up in different contexts. You might find that, if you could just go back to the last slide, you might find that the scammer is trying to impersonate either the government, a business, or somebody that you know. And then scams might also involve something called phishing, where they're sending a fake email, a fake text that's meant to get the consumer to send information or send money. So you'll hear about both of these things when Carol, Josh, and I present on the specific topics later. And so we've covered a brief overview of the types of scams. So what is the strategy that most scammers are using? They will often play on emotions. So we have a chart here that's showing 3 kind of ways that this will happen. So the first is emotional manipulation. Basically, that's creating excitement or fear. So maybe it's, click here to claim this prize, getting the person kind of excited about something good that might happen. Or maybe they're saying, if you don't send us this information, then you're going to face some sort of financial penalty. Then you have the sense of urgency. So when a scammer contacts somebody and they are saying that you need to act quickly, you need to take action, this can kind of make us, as you would imagine, not stop to think and consider, is this real? Is this something that makes sense? So using that sense of urgency is something that they use a lot. And then there's also, like I mentioned, false trust. So impersonating somebody that you know or an entity that you already trust, again, to make folks skip that step of, does this make sense? Is this a real request? We also just wanted to note that oftentimes victims of scams may not report due to shame. So it's really important for us also to check our own bias in terms of not victim blaming and kind of understanding how these scams work and how we can all get caught up in them. And so this is just a brief checklist for you all that you can share, you can use yourselves, and you can also share with your clients. So the first is pause, take a moment before you act. Also, examining the information closely is important. So looking at, what is this email address that this email is coming from? Is this a legitimate business? That kind of thing. You can contact the business or the person via known contact info to verify. So for example, I got a call recently from somebody who said they were my bank, and it seemed a little bit fishy. So I called the number that I have for my bank to find out, is this real? Then there's, of course, never sharing personal sensitive information with someone you don't know, and avoiding wiring money or sending gift cards before verifying a request. And Carol's going to talk a little bit more about payment apps as well. So let's jump into a quick Mentimeter question now that you've heard some of the basic information. So you can jump right back into the same Mentimeter, either using the link in the chat or go to menti.com and use the code. It's like a bunch of you are in there. So let's get that quiz question going. So what is the best way to tell if someone who has contacted you is authentic? So we have our options are contact the person or entity on your own, ask the person for their credentials, or ask for a manager. So you've got about 10 seconds, choose what you think is the best option based on what you've heard so far, your own personal knowledge, and we'll see what folks think. Yeah, so 81 people said contact the person or entity on your own, which is really the best way to tell if a request is authentic. The reason why we have asked the person for their credentials on there is that it can be the case, depending on, who the person says they are, they could have false credentials, or maybe, you're not equipped to evaluate that person's ID or know what the real credentials would look like. So it's really best to contact the entity on your own via a known method of communication. All right, so let's go back to the slides, and I would like to hand it over to Carol Cando-Pineda from the Federal Trade Commission to take us through some of these latest technologies.
Terrific. Hi, everybody. And thanks so much, Claire. Thanks to HUD for having us here to talk about these really important issues. So I am Carol Cando-Pineda. I'm with the Federal Trade Commission. I'm a lawyer and project manager in our Division of Consumer and Business Education. Basically, that means I manage teams to develop all kinds of materials for consumers, mostly materials related to helping people avoid scams. So the FTC is a federal agency that protects consumers and competition, right? You probably have heard of us. We do that by investigating deceptive and unfair acts and gathering reports about these practices from consumers. We bring law enforcement cases that challenge those practices. And then we put on education efforts like our discussion today. And we spend a lot of energy building an extensive network of partnerships so that we can collaborate with other people to be sure that we reach as many people as possible with these anti-scam messages, because it's always better if we can help you avoid losing money ahead of time. So let's get started with that next slide. So this is really just to set the scene a little bit. The interesting tidbit here is we collect information from consumers all during the year, and then we compile it into a data book. And we announce that at sort of the beginning of the year what the numbers were for the previous year. We usually get around 2 million, 2.5, 2.6, 2.4. It sort of changes. It depends year to year. So quite a number of complaints every year. The interesting thing about 2022 was that the number of complaints went down. But look at those losses. Look at the amount of money that people lost. That was way up. That was over 8 billion. And I believe they've reconfigured the numbers to update them a little bit, and it's even higher. It's about 9 billion. So $9 billion lost to fraud last year. And that is significantly up from 2021. It's like 2 billion more than 2021. So obviously, we still have a scam and a fraud problem, and people are losing a lot of money to it. So let's go to the next slide. I just wanted to quickly touch on these two studies, technical studies that FTC did to give you kind of an idea of what happens to information sort of once it's out in the wild. So in the first study, FTC staff identified websites whose shopping carts appeared to be compromised by malicious software. So that if the consumer bought something on that site, the malicious software would send the buyer's information to scammers. That was the point of that software. So FTC used 50 fake payment cards to make transactions on these sites, credit cards, things like that. And the question the FTC wanted to know was, how long did it take scammers to use that stolen information? So in most cases, it took about 50 days. So it wasn't immediate. They sat on it for a little while. In some cases, 1 or 2 cases, it was used very, very quickly. And in other cases, it was maybe over 200 days by the time it was used. But most of the time, it was within about 50 days. And over the course of a year, the thieves use 15 of those cards. They use 15 of the cards, but they use them repeatedly. So the thieves tried to use those 15 cards at least 45 different times. So they're just going to keep at it. Attempted payments ranged from 10 cents up to over $1,000. So they may try to test and see whether they can get away with these very small amounts to see if anybody's going to notice, and then push until they can try for a larger amount and to really start to scam somebody. The second study followed phony leaked data to see how it might be misused. So FTC created fake data for fake consumers, login credentials for email, credit cards, things like that. And then FTC staff linked it twice. They used different methods, different days, different times of the days to sort of evaluate if that made any difference. Once they leaked the data, what happened to it? So the first time they leaked, the scammers tried to use that fake data within an hour and a half. So that's kind of interesting, right? It was pretty quick, right? They didn't sit on it in that situation. And for the second leak, the scammers tried to use it within 9 minutes, so almost immediately. So this is a very fast-moving area, and these studies were done, a few years before the pandemic, I think. So we can't project too much, but it's just enough to know that once data is out there, it might be used over a long period of time, and it might be used repeatedly. So let's talk next about cryptocurrency scams. So, you've heard from Claire some of the basics of how scams operate, and there's always that pressure involved, that sense of urgency. And imposter scams, the scammer is pretending to be somebody legitimate, somebody that you might trust, somebody that you've already done business with, right? And it's been the #1 category of scam reported to us for several years. And there's all different types. The one real common denominator, other than that pressure and the emotion, was that they want you to pay in ways that make it really hard to get your money back. So that's kind of a recurring theme, and we'll go back to that. So we're seeing the use of cryptocurrency and these kinds of scams grow. So since 2021, 575 million of all crypto fraud losses were to bogus investment opportunities. So the kind of imposter where they're trying to get you invest in crypto. So let's go to our next slide. The scammers are going to look for ways to gain your attention and gain your trust to get you to invest. They know that that's in the air. Scammers follow the headlines. They're very professional. They know that people want to invest in crypto. They're interested in it. They're curious. And so they're going to try to get your attention by claiming to be an investment manager, sometimes a celebrity that has got sort of the inside scoop and they're trying to share it with people. Or they may pretend to be an online love interest. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. The hallmarks of this kind of a cryptocurrency investment scam are that they're guaranteed that you're going to make a lot of money, huge returns, big payouts, guaranteed, very little effort. And, you know, we all know that nothing is that simple, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch. There's no such thing as huge returns with no risk. So I mentioned an online love interest. So we're starting to see the blending of crypto investment scams with romance scams. So the scammer creates a profile on an online dating site, or they DM you, they message you privately on a social media platform and express interest and try to gauge your interest. Maybe they've been looking around at your posts and they see that you're talking about relationships or dating, or they sense that you're interested perhaps in a relationship, and they'll reach out. And once they've gained your trust, they will then say, I want to teach you how to invest for our future. If we're going to get married, if we're going to be together, if we're going to have a future, we need to build a nest egg, and I'm going to teach you how to invest so that we can do that. And that's how they hook you into trusting them, and then perhaps sending them a small amount of money. And the scammer may even go to the lengths of setting up an account on a site that looks like a crypto investment site. It looks like it's genuine. You see your name, you see your money invested in that account. You're able to take money out if you want. And that gives people a great sense of comfort that, you know, perhaps this is real because I've been able to get my money and to take it back out again. But maybe it's only a small amount of money that they've asked you for. And then once they feel like you really trust them, they're going to ask for that big amount of money. And once you send them that $10,000, they disappear, the site disappears, your money is gone. So you got to pay attention to how somebody asks you to send them money, asks you to pay. If it's going to be impossible to get your money back, you want to slow down, take a deep breath, think about it, and talk to some other people that you trust to run that by you. Another instance where we see cryptocurrency playing into these romance scams is that an online romance scammer may persuade you to share very personal information about yourself. They may persuade you to share intimate photos, and then they try to extort money from you afterwards, threatening to expose those photos publicly or to your family and friends, or to share that information that you intended to be kept confidential. And then they'll usually ask you to pay them by cryptocurrency, or they're going to reveal that information. Okay, so this screen shows you sort of the picture of a current phishing scam about cryptocurrency. This one happens usually by text, and Claire referred to phishing. It's sort of the granddad of all these imposter scams. They can happen through email, call, or text, but we are seeing more and more scams happen by text message now. We just did an analysis of some of our the reports that have come in, and text message scams spiked during the pandemic, and they never really came down. People are losing hundreds of millions of dollars to these sorts of scams. So, in this particular one, you'll get that text that says your crypto wallet has been blocked and that you need to click on a link. In this particular case, it refers to MetaMask, which is a cryptocurrency wallet. The text would have you believe that your wallet is blocked, and that if you don't act fast, click a link and update your wallet, you're going to lose access to your cryptocurrency, to your assets that you have in that wallet. So it's really just an attempt to scare you. You never want to click on a link that you get in an unexpected text. If you're really concerned that there's a problem, you want to contact the company, the person, your family, whoever it is that the scammer is pretending to be, whoever you're getting this unexpected text from, you want to reach out at a number that you know is legitimate and check it out that way. And chances are everything is fine. And this text is really just trying to get information and money from you. So one last twist I wanted to mention is that increasingly, we're starting to see AI voice cloning starting to be used in scams. So this is most applicable in family emergency scams, where the scammer can get clips of a loved one's voice and then clone it and make it appear that your loved one is actually saying all kinds of things that they never said. And so it's really just kind of a heads up warning that this is happening. And that, again, if this call doesn't, it sounds kind of off, or if somebody is demanding that you pay them in these ways that make it difficult to get money back, wiring money, gift cards to send the account number and the PIN, sending cryptocurrency, something should go off in your head that maybe this isn't exactly what it seems to be, and try to contact that person through a number you know is legitimate so that you can see that they're safe and sound and that this is just a scammer trying to get money from you. And remember, scammers can spoof the caller ID so it looks like the number comes from a real phone number, even though it really doesn't. So that's no proof that that call is actually coming from a loved one. So you really always want to focus on how somebody is asking you to pay. And so last, let's talk a little bit about mobile payment apps. These are starting to creep more and more into the scam territory. Not that the payment apps themselves are scams, but that the scammers are using them to get people to send money. So you don't want to share your account credentials, right? You want to treat them as the valuable information that they are, so nobody can misuse them. You want to protect your account with multi-factor authentication or a PIN. So multi-factor authentication is when you have a password and another piece of information. So maybe you get a text from a company. It's like having two passwords almost, and it adds that extra layer of security to your account. You want to always double check the recipient's information. Are you sending money to the right person? Don't look at it quickly, or don't assume, oh yeah, I know I owe Joe some money, that must be from him. Always double check to make sure that you're sending it to the right person. And so let's go to our last slide. So this is really just some information. We won't go all the way through it, but if you paid a scammer by mobile app, some of them actually do have customer service set up for you to report it and to try to get your money back. At least register a complaint with them and tell them that the service is being used for a scam. And so you'll be able to keep that slide and have some information. That it's also on FTC's website on consumer.ftc.gov if you want to look that up. And the last thing I really want to underline is for you to share with your clients. The biggest red flag of a scam is how someone asks you to pay. Is it by wire transfer, gift cards, or cryptocurrency? It is most likely a scam because it's almost impossible to get your money back. And if you see one of these scams, we would love for you to tell us at reportfraud.ftc.gov. And so now I'm going to invite Claire to come on back so we can continue the presentation.
Thanks, Carol. Let's do another Mentimeter question about some of the content that you just presented on, which was really interesting and useful. So folks can, I'll just drop the link in the chat again. You can go back to that same website. And looks like folks are in there for the most part. So let's go ahead and start that quiz question. So our question is, so Carol was just really hitting this point. Why are payment apps and crypto schemes particularly dangerous? So we have easy to send money quickly, hard to verify who you're sending to, confusion around how new apps and currency work, or you can select all of the above. So in this webinar, we're really trying to get you information about how these types of schemes are impacting consumers. So let's see what folks thought. Yes, all of the above. So like Carol was just talking about, when you're using a mobile payment app or you're dealing with crypto, folks don't always know how they work. They may be confused. it's very difficult to verify what entity you're sending money to, and it's so easy to just click that button and send. So most of you got that right. It was all of the above. Let's now turn to a couple of scenarios that we're going to go through. So the first one is to do with home ownership. So basically, on the next slide, what I'm going to do is just go through a pretty simple scenario, and then we're going to pull up a Mentimeter question to ask you to identify what are the red flags that we see here. So here in National Homeownership Month, we wanted to give you a little bit of content that can help you advise homeowners who might be vulnerable. So we have homeowner Sarah has recently been struggling to pay her mortgage after losing her job. She receives a phone call from a number she doesn't recognize offering mortgage relief services. And the company asks her for a $500 wire transfer to pay for services up front. And so we have Tiara is Sarah's housing counselor. So let's just go right back into that Mentimeter to have you identify what might be these red flags. Just put the link back in, but I think folks are in there. So what are the red flags in this scenario to indicate it might be a scam? We're going to put them on the screen. So is it that they ask for upfront payment? Is it that they ask for a wire transfer? Is it that they're calling from an unknown number, or is it all of the above? So what are some signs that this might not be real? And you've got a few seconds left. Get your answers in. I have a feeling most folks are going to get this one. And so, yeah, all of the above. So, you know, any individual thing on its own may or may not be a flag, but if you see any one of these or all of them, it's good to train your clients to kind of understand when they're in a vulnerable position, what might be the signs that something is not legitimate. So if we go back to the slides, we can just put that red flag next to all three of those things as signs that it might be a scam. So yeah, so then we can talk about what are some steps that the housing counselor can take with Sarah to resolve the situation. So, I noticed somebody in the Q&A put in a scenario already about someone who had a loan modification scam. So I know many of you have dealt with this before, but quite simply, things that Tiara and Sarah can do are, one, contact the servicer directly and find out, you know, is this, you know, have they tried to reach out to Sarah? Is this a legitimate communication? Second, don't make any payments to anyone other than the servicer, the mortgage company. So anytime a client, right, and you all know this, anytime a client gets an offer from a company or a person who is saying, you know, I can save your home, you want to go straight to the servicer. Third, you can report the scam. So you can go to the servicer, you can go to your state attorney general, who often keeps track of this sort of thing. You can also report it to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And then, of course, you want to do the work of housing counseling. So working with Sarah and her servicer on default prevention. And so, you know, that was a scam related to mortgage relief. There are also a couple of other versions of this that might affect homeowners. So we had Gerald Mayer at the beginning talked about wire fraud. This would be happening when somebody is buying a home. So this is a situation where it's often false communication telling somebody, okay, we're ready for you to wire your closing costs or something like that, or even your down payment. And they wire it to the wrong person. So we have an entire webinar about this, and we'll have the link in the resources section. But this is actually something that's on the rise, so it's a very good thing to keep an eye out for. Second is deed transfer. So a scammer targeting a homeowner in distress with a phony foreclosure rescue scheme that involves them signing over the deed. So of course, as you all know, advising your clients never to sign over that deed document is so key. I know I live in New York City, we've had a lot of this here, and it's very, very difficult to untangle. So that's a really big one. And then the loan modification scam. So somebody requesting payment for a fake loan modification, or, falsely working on a homeowner to set up a loan mod and having them make the trial payments to that fake entity. So again, you're going to want to always go back to the known contact info for the servicer. And we've got a bit of a handout here that lists some of these and a variety of other scams. And so I'll just drop that link in the chat for you, and it's also on the training page. So with that, let's invite Josh Friedman on from the CFPB to take you through a military scenario.
All right. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. So as Claire mentioned, my name is Josh Friedman. I am a consumer response specialist for the Office of Service Member Affairs. So CFPB is required by act of, as part of the congressional statute that created the CFPB, we're required to have an office that deals exclusively with service member issues. So we have three statutory functions. One, which is my primary focus, which is to monitor consumer complaints. And I know there was a question that was dropped in the Q&A specifically about what happens to complaints. So we do monitor complaints, specifically complaints from service members. We look for spikes and trends. We look for issues that are issues new and emerging issues, particularly in the frauds and scam space. We have a second role, which is to educate and empower, which is something very similar to what I'm doing right here. This is presenting educational tools to help people make good better decisions in the financial marketplace. And our third requirement is to collaborate with other federal agencies. So here we are, we're collaborating with of course HUD, but also with the DoD, with the FTC, with state agencies, to get the message out, to educate service members about decisions in the financial marketplace and frauds and scams, and help make good decisions in the financial marketplace. So the scenario I'm going to present to you with this next slide is unfortunately real. We did get a consumer complaint from a service member that, and of course I've changed the names. So I know at the beginning, Claire mentioned, sort of the three tools of a fraud, of a scammer. So that emotional manipulation, that creating the excitement, that creating that sense of urgency, and building that false trust. And I think all three of those really happened here. So you have a service member who is excited about going to their new duty station. In this particular scenario, we have a service member who was stationed overseas and was being posted back to the US and needed a place to live. Now, service members are often targeted, as the slide indicates, service members are often targeted because they have a steady income, and particularly in the area of housing. We're not always perfect, but the government usually does a pretty decent job of making sure service members' housing allowance is adjusted to allow for growth in the marketplace and for rental housing. And relocation creates a lot of risk for service members. And again, is something we've talked about. And if you follow CFPB and you follow some of our blogging content, you know that we've talked a lot about the importance of service members being financially responsible. I think most of us who work with military members, we know that that's a huge issue. And the big issue there when it comes to service members is maintaining your security clearance and having good credit, and having paying your bills on time is an important part to maintaining that security clearance. And unfortunately, when we've found a lot, when there have been, if you watch the news and when there have been issues with classified information falling into the wrong hands, oftentimes there was a monetary motive behind it. So next slide, we'll go to our specific scenario. So here it is. Brian is an active duty service member. He's excited. He's searching for new rental housing. He's moving from Europe back to the US, and he sees this house online and it is perfect. So you're seeing the excitement. He's seeing this house. He's picturing his family there, sitting on the back deck, having barbecues, entertaining your friends. Everything about this house looks perfect. So now you see excitement building up. So now Brian submits an application, and he gets approved. Now all of a sudden you see the landlord sending Brian an email saying, "Hey, I just got 4 more applications, and each one of them is willing to pay even more rent." So you're kind of like what Claire was talking about at the beginning. Now we're seeing that sense of urgency building up. Hey, I got all these people want this place if you don't take it. And now the landlord says something, for those of us who've been in the military, we've probably heard it a million times. Hey, I love the military. I am grateful for your service. Thank you for your service. I want to help you out. I know you don't make a lot of money. I want to rent to you. So now you're building that false trust, that sense that this person, likes you personally and it appreciates your particular situation. And here's the hook. Here's the ask. Can you send me the security deposit and the first month's rent over PayPal or Venmo? And make sure you indicate you're paying a friend. Unfortunately, again, as I emphasized, this really happened. So right away, we're seeing that red flag. And again, and there's something about, and I know I saw questions in the chat about what does CFPB do about frauds and scammers. And I'll just tell you at the outset, we do regulate the providers of financial products and services. So that includes credit reporting, which is tenant screening is credit reporting. Companies that review tenants' rental history, credit history for the purpose of obtaining housing, that's considered part of that falls under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. But also we regulate checking and savings accounts, credit cards, and there are regulations that we enforce that govern what companies, what banks are required to do when there's an unauthorized transaction. And unfortunately, one of the things that happens with a lot of frauds and scammers is they try and get around those regulations and those policies that banks use to avoid having to pay out unauthorized transactions. So we'll move forward to the next slide. So Brian is sending out his security deposit, $2,000 to his landlord's email address, and he's using a peer-to-peer provider. So for those that don't know, peer-to-peer is Cash App, it's Venmo, and he's saying that he is the landlord's friend. He's doing exactly what he's asked to do. And he sends an additional $2,000 for the first month's rent. So now we're talking, Brian has paid $4,000 to somebody he's never met, saying this person is his friend because he wants this house. Brian is going to arrive to his first duty station the next month. He goes to what he believes is his house and discovers that the property he rented is occupied. The landlord, the person he's been speaking to all this time, the person who got $4,000 of his money, doesn't even own it. It's occupied by another family. And as I mentioned, CFPB can do many, many things when it comes to a company carrying out an unauthorized transaction. But the challenge that we have is when you send that money as a friend using peer-to-peer, that's not an unauthorized transaction. That it's being done following your instructions. So it is considered an authorized transaction. And at that point, there isn't, from a regulatory perspective, a lot CFPB can do. So if we want to flip to the next slide. Couple of actions that could have been taken to prevent these kinds of scams. One is look up the owner of the property. You're speaking to a most local governments have a website where you can go and verify who actually owns a particular house, a particular piece of property. Look up the owner's name. Look up the property, but by address. Do you see the property listed elsewhere with different contact information? Sometimes the scammer will literally just copy an ad from Realtor or apartments.com and go somewhere else and repost it on Craigslist. One of the great things about being in the military is you have usually your gaining base, you will have a sponsor. You may already have a trusted friend on that base. Ask somebody you trust to go check out that property and look at the address and verify that it's there and it's advertised and it's listed for rent. And finally, as we've discussed, never wire that money using a peer-to-peer product. The moment you use that friend feature, it's just like you're paying in cash. And finally, and this is something that the FTC recommends, before you make a payment, before you pay a month's rent, before you pay a deposit, make sure you've got a lease and you've got a key in your hand to make sure you really do have the property that you believe you're renting. Yeah, and just the only other thing I'll say before I hand it back over to Claire, one of the other perils that comes about sometimes when you are a victim of an unauthorized transaction, sometimes even when the bank or the credit card company decides to reverse that transaction as a gesture of goodwill, there is no regulation that prevents a bank or a credit card provider from simply giving you the requisite notice and canceling your account. So sometimes even if you get your money back, you still suffer the penalty of having your account privileges revoked, and that creates a whole new set of problems. So, unfortunately, we've seen there are actually since this has happened twice now since I've mentioned since I've first introduced this scenario. I have no reason to doubt it's happened more than the 2 times that were complained to CFPB about. So it's something we really want to rein in and hope we can protect as many service members as possible. So that's what I had. We want to go to the next slide. Other things that you could, other mentions that you can do as a service member to prevent identity theft, to prevent frauds and scammers. Housing aside, anytime you're deployed or stationed away from your home duty station for more than 30 days, you're entitled to have an active duty alert or a security freeze on your credit report. I have done this just to make sure it works. When I've gotten called up on reserve duty for more than a month, I've put the alert on my credit report. It works. You cannot open a new credit account without making direct contact with the service member. Reviewing your credit report regularly. For those that don't know, and I know there's a lot of companies out there on the internet that promise to review your credit for you, but there's only one site, annualcreditreport.com. That is the only government approved site, and everybody gets one free credit report from each of the 3 major national credit reporting companies. You're allowed to review each one once per year. And it's always a good idea just to review it and make sure all the accounts that are on your credit report are accurate, that your payments are being reported accurately and your debts are reported accurately, and that nobody has opened up a new account in your name. And there is credit monitoring available for active duty members. So with that, I will turn things back over to Claire.
Great. Thanks, Josh. It's really helpful to have some of that information that is specific to the military community. So thank you for presenting on that. We are going to do another quick Mentimeter quiz. And so this one is not explicitly covered, but I'm interested to see what you all think. I put the link in the chat again, and you have the code. So let's jump into that quiz question. It is, which military or other entities are commonly impersonated by scammers targeting service members? So Josh talked about the fact that military service members are often targeted for identity theft. We have the Defense Finance and Accounting Service, potential landlord, loan or credit card companies, or all of the above. So the question is, which of these commonly target service members? And yeah, it's all of the above. So the point of this question is basically to emphasize that even beyond what regular sort of consumers are thinking about, service members need to be advised that they should be watching out for all of these types of scams, in particular this Defense Finance and Accounting Service, which is basically the entity that manages payroll for service members. So there's a lot of specific content there, and we will get into that in the resources section as well to help you all learn more, since we're kind of scratching the surface here. So I'm going to go through, we'll go through pretty quickly these tools and resources so we can have time for question and answer. So I will just point folks to this slide, which is again linked on the training page. We've got a bunch of CFPB tools and resources. There are many more than even are on this page, but you have some information about spotting identity theft, how this affects military service members. We've got some information about elder fraud prevention, medical debt, and money held in payment apps. And then on the next slide, we have some FTC resources. So again, I'll just go through these pretty quickly. From Carol, we have, where you can go to report different problems. So identity theft, you can go to identitytheft.gov. You can report fraud to the FTC, and you can get consumer alerts from the FTC. So they're going to release the latest information that they have about what consumers should be watching out for. And then, like Carol said, we have this link to information about how folks are using AI to impersonate family members' voices. And as far as housing counseling resources, we have, like I said, that handout that I linked to earlier. We also have a consumer-facing flyer that you can hand out to your clients. And so I'll drop the link to that in the chat as well. We have a flyer about COVID-19 frauds and scams, which some of these may still be relevant. Wanted to share that as well. And then a number of webinars. So I mentioned real estate wire fraud. We've got a bunch of others on specific topics, including military tenant rights and elder financial exploitation. So be sure to check those out. And I think we have a few additional resources from other entities, a link to information about active duty credit monitoring. So service members are entitled to that from the 3 major credit bureaus. That's a really great service to take advantage of. And let's move into the question and answer. So I will invite Josh and Carol back on camera. And folks from the audience have been getting into the Q&A box, which we appreciate. So let me see what folks are asking about. It looks like there's a question here, which I think a number of folks are kind of wondering something along these lines. So when you report a fraud or a scam to CFPB and to FTC, what happens to that? What can folks expect to see if they assist a client in doing that?
So, on the CFPB end, and this is just one of the unfortunate and cruel realities, is we have to be able to attribute that, the bad conduct to a specific actor. So oftentimes these fraudsters and scammers are very difficult to attribute. So what usually happens is if we receive a complaint about a fraud or a scam, obviously we take the information, we use it to inform our educational products like I'm doing today. But generally speaking, if it's somebody, we can't locate a company, if we can't attribute that complaint to an actor, we would upload that to the Sentinel network, which is a network that is maintained by the FTC. So that and there's a litany of government agencies that can read and access data through Sentinel, including law enforcement. So every now and again, that data can be helpful in someone committing a fraud or a scam being apprehended by law enforcement. But generally, again, if CFPB cannot attribute, it really is challenging for us.
Carol, what is your take from FTC?
Yeah, I would agree with Josh. Sometimes these cases can be very difficult. Every complaint from a consumer is extremely valuable to us because it does go into Consumer Sentinel and it is shared with other law enforcers. And that just increases the likelihood that somebody will be able to put together a case or will be able to investigate it. If we can't get money directly back to you, maybe we could at least stop that scammer or slow down that kind of a scam. It's also extremely helpful in letting us know how scams are evolving, because they do change and evolve very rapidly. And over time, you start to see things come back around again, and maybe a new technology gives life to an old scam. And without getting consumers' complaints, we don't have any idea of what the scope of that is out in the world. We may be seeing it, but we don't know how many people that it's affecting. And it helps us put together information to be able to warn other people to maybe shut it down a little bit sooner.
Great, thanks for that. Yeah, it sounds like kind of the message from both of you is kind of along the lines of education. So what we're doing, like you said, right now, in terms of when you receive complaints, understanding what's happening out there in the marketplace and being able to inform housing counselors, consumers proactively about how to avoid this, because it is so hard to recover money once you've sent it to somebody who you should not have.
That's right. And we very often will be able to build cases, and we return millions of dollars every year to consumers based on our cases, but we certainly can't guarantee that we can get money back to everybody that's lost it, or that every complaint that's filed is going to lead to a case. Because even if we had those kind of resources and you could look into every single complaint and try to build an investigation around it, sometimes the evidence is just not there. You know, the scammers know how to cover their tracks and sell assets, and sometimes it's very difficult to determine who actually is behind the scam, just as Josh said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I have another question here who was wondering whether folks can access the study that you were talking about, Carol, that described how information is used and when information is used by scammers.
I have a link to, I think, the first study, not to the second. Somebody had just shared that summary information with me. I don't know how useful it'll be. It's a very technical, academic kind of a study. It's not the kind of thing you would share with your clients. It wouldn't really be any use to them, but I can certainly track down the link to the study and share it later.
Perfect, thank you. And I guess so we just have a couple minutes left here, but I'm wondering if either of you has any final thoughts you want to give to the audience today to wrap up.
I guess I'm going to sound like a broken record and just say the same thing over and over again, that the stories change over time, they evolve over time. Scammers are always going to try to take advantage of whatever they see happening in the marketplace, or whatever they see happening with a particular subset of people that maybe they can target because they know what the vulnerability is. And whether that's homeowners that are facing foreclosure, or whether it's people that think a loved one is injured someplace in a foreign country, right? The stories fall everywhere in between. But if you know those warning signs, if you suspect somebody's pressuring you, if all of a sudden you're in this urgent situation, you get a call, email, text out of the blue, and they're pressuring you to send money, you know, in one of those ways, if everybody recognizes that as a red flag, it goes a long way to being able to stop, take a deep breath, and figure the situation out before you lose any money, before you share any information.
Carol. Josh, any quick thought to add there?
I don't know how to top that. That was great advice from Carol. But just, you know, generally, you know, we want to protect you as best we can, but the important thing is don't send money to people you don't know. And there's just, I think it's just all there is to it. Just, you know, resist that temptation. You know, like you said, when people are creating this false sense of urgency and this false trust. I mean, those are red flags. Just see the flags and make sure you're only sending money to people you know.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again both for sharing your expertise today with our audience. I think we can move on to our last couple slides here. So want to let you know about, I believe, upcoming trainings. So we have, and this should actually say register for the Office of Housing Counseling Virtual Community Conference, which is happening in September. And we have the link for you in the training digest. And then also, I think we have a slide here about housing counseling today. So this is the new blog format product from the Office of Housing Counseling, where we're sharing stories, industry updates, there's videos, there's information about new tools on the HUD Exchange. So if you haven't checked that out yet, I do encourage you to try that and also to follow it on LinkedIn. You'll get the updates there. If you need to be in touch, you can always go to the HUD Exchange Housing Counseling page. You can email housing.counseling@hud.gov. And you can search for approved agencies if you are not a housing counselor. And yeah, so just to wrap up, I want to thank everybody for attending today, receiving this information that hopefully can help you and your clients avoid some of the scams and the frauds that we've heard about today. So have a great day.